The Master Liquid ML360R RGB is a new all-in-one by Cooler Master that sports a 360mm radiator, addressable RGB fans, and a low-profile dual-chamber pump. The nicely sleeved FEP tubing has a premium feel, and you can use the included RGB control unit to customize the addressable LEDs on the fans and pump, or plug directly into your motherboard. For more on the Master Liquid ML360R RGB, click the sponsor link in the video's description.
Excellent!
What's up guys, how's it going, and welcome back to Paul's Hardware. Today's video is going to be kind of a play it by ear video where I'm going to test some big questions about the new RTX 2070 graphics cards. These just launched like yesterday as of the filming of this video, and they're available for sale today as of the filming of this video. And if you watched my intro video where I ran benchmarks on these cards, you may have noticed that there are two different prices. There is a $500 price, which is supposed to be how much the cheapest RTX 2070 cost, and that is going to ship at a frequency that is sort of set and regulated by NVIDIA, and they can't ship at higher frequencies than that. But you can, of course, get manufacturer overclock versions of the card. This is the MSI Armor 2070, RTX 2070, by the way. This is the Gaming Z RTX 2070. So this is a $600 version. This is a $500 version. The big question is, what is the actual difference between the GPUs themselves, and can you overclock a $500 version to get yourself pretty much the same performance as you can get with the $600 version? Because for 500 bucks, yes, the RTX 2070 is an expensive graphics card, but you can kind of make a case for it when you compare it to like the GTX 1080 and other cards that cost around $500. For 600 bucks though, it just becomes like way too overpriced. So today we're going to answer two questions. Can you overclock a $500 RTX 2070 to give you the same performance as a $600 RTX 2070? And then hopefully also, since these are supposed to be available for sale today, can you actually buy a $500 RTX 2070? Are they still going to be in stock today? Or are they just going to be products that, you know, there's a few of, but they sell out immediately and everyone will be stuck spending $580 or $600 on a more expensive one? I've reached out to some of our manufacturer partners to get their feedback on this, but for starters, I think we should actually disassemble both of these cards to get a closer look at the GPU itself. So here's our two GPUs, the Gaming Z, the $600 version on the right, the Armor, or the $500 version on the left. There are, of course, some immediate differences between the two that you can see. Like, for instance, the Armor has a base plate that goes down most of the board and includes some cooling for some of the components down at this end, whereas the Gaming Z's actually stops over here. But the contact plate for the cooler side itself actually extends out here and makes contact with some of those. And it's also just a beefier one, you can tell. Just by holding it, there's a lot more fins in there, so it's got more thermal mass to absorb heat and dissipate it. It's also got a 6-pipe array over here with a couple thicker, it looks like 6mm and 8mm pipes, whereas this one here is using a 5-pipe array with, looks like all 6mm pipes. It does have the direct copper contact, though, with the actual GPU. The circuit board design for these is actually based on the same layout. You can kind of notice because it's a little taller here, but it has a cutout for the PCI Express graphics power connectors here. Still going with an 8-pin and a 6-pin, but the power delivery elements themselves is a full array here. We have an 8-phase power delivery setup here versus the 6-phase over on this one. And you can actually see the blank space here where there would be some chokes and some capacitors. MOSFETs are under this plate right here as compared to the fully kitted out bank of VRMs on the Gaming Z. But this was actually my main point, and the main reason I tore these down was to actually look at the GPU die itself, which I've wiped off as best I can, and you can see the actual SKU. TU106 is the GPU die that the RTX 2070s are based on, but as you can see, there is a slight variant here. TU106-400A-A1 for the $600 version, whereas the $500 version here is TU106-400-A1, so not 400A-A1, just -400. So this quick teardown confirms what I kind of already knew, and that is that there is actually a different GPU, or a slight variation of the TU106 GPU used in the $500 versions of the cards versus the $600 versions of the cards. So the next thing I'm going to do, and this is going to be a somewhat limited test again because I only have two cards to test against each other, I'm hoping some other people will also maybe do a similar test like this, is to see if I try to manually overclock this lower end version, the $500 version here, can I achieve the same overclocks that this version ships with? Can I save myself $100 by doing some manual overclocks with this? The manufacturers with this version of the GPU that ships in the $500 versions are specifically limited by NVIDIA, or specifically restricted by NVIDIA from shipping this at a higher frequency. Does that mean that the chips themselves aren't capable of reaching those frequencies, or is it just something that NVIDIA has put out there so that they can differentiate these products and sell them at two different prices, even though the potential performance is the same between them? Also, I have at least one follow-up from a manufacturer so far. EVGA has confirmed that yes, they have a $500 version. It's available directly on the EVGA website. It's available for sale right now, and I'm also asking if they expect availability to continue through the holidays, and they said yes, they think it should. That's a little forward-looking, so we can't verify that, of course, until time goes by and we see if they stay in stock, but at least for now, I'll post links in the video description to $500 versions of the RTX 2070s wherever I find them available. Alright guys, so I got my test bed loaded back up using pretty much the same settings and everything that I was using yesterday. I did load up MSI Afterburner to use that for overclocking. And really the only difference here when it comes to the shipping frequency of the graphics cards is going to be the base and the boost clock. So by default, the base clock is 1410 and the boost clock is 1620 for this $500 version. In my testing yesterday, the base clock of the $600 version was still 1410, but the boost was 1830, 210 points higher. So literally all I'm going to do to try to save us $100 here is just add 210 points to our core clock, hit apply there, and then the boost clock here in just a moment should reflect 1830, which is the boost clock of the $600 version. And now we can test and see if it was effective. I'm just going to run TimeSpy. Damn it, Joe. Ruined. Everything's ruined. All right, final test is finishing up here, and our GPU score of 9331 is the score to beat. That's what we got with the original test yesterday, and look at that. We're not at 9331, we're at 9164, but that still is a huge jump up. The graphics score at stock was 8392. So we went from 8392 to 9164. We're still just slightly shy of the Gaming Z's graphics score of 9331, but we've come much, much closer to it. And again, $100 less, and you saw what I did. I punched in plus 210, and that's what I got. I also want to point out temperature, and this wasn't a long stress test or anything, but we only got up to 66 degrees, so that's not even a higher temperature than I saw in my overall testing running through a full suite of benchmarks when I initially rolled this out. But I want to run one more test here, and all I'm really going to do here, just to see if we can bump that score up even just a little bit more, is in addition to the plus 210 on the core clock, I'm also going to take the power limit slider and max that out. Max on this card is 114%, or adding 14% more. So I'm just going to hit apply there, and then we'll run the test one more time. So here is another result from our test, and that is that with the power limit maxed, we actually froze up. And somehow it's now telling me this is a valid score. My valid score of 0. All right, so here we can see that our frequency as it's running along is about the same frequency that we were hitting with the Gaming Z, which is about 1950 megahertz on average. So let's analyze this run. Our GPU core clock actually got up to 2070, which is actually a higher max frequency than the Gaming Z hit out of the box, and we can sort of see as this chart as it's slowly disappearing. We were hitting around 1950 megahertz, 1950, 1970, 1965, 1935. So it was also hitting around the same frequency. Temperature was also within range. We only hit a 68 degrees Celsius max. Just something about that power limit it didn't like, and threw an error and caused the test to fail. So I'm going to do one more test here. Just going to drop from 114 to 110 on the power limit and see if that will introduce a little bit of stability and see what we come out with our benchmark test. So we had a crash once again. So this is kind of worrying to me a little bit, at least in that this GPU doesn't seem to be accepting more power. An additional power limit, which is going to increase the temperatures, also allow it to increase power consumption. Like for instance, max power consumption is 112.9% of its rated TDP. So this introduces some questions, and unfortunately they're questions that I cannot directly answer because again, I've only got one card to test. So anything I'm going to say here is going to be somewhat anecdotal related to this card. So what this indicates to me is that, well, obviously the GPU isn't able to run through the test successfully with the frequency it's running at right now. I don't think it's a temperature issue, and it might potentially be an issue with the power delivery to the GPU itself, or just the GPU ASIC quality itself, which would indicate that it's good that I'm doing this video, because that might seem to indicate that the TU-106-400A dies can potentially overclock a little bit better. I can't say that with too much certainty because I've only tested 2 cards against each other, but perhaps others who have these cards will come out and do some similar testing so we can get a more accurate picture of what we should expect when it comes to the 2070. But more to the point, and again, just to see if we can get $600 performance out of a $500 card, I'm doing one more modification here to my overclock, trying to keep things simple still, but power limit's at 110, core clock is at plus 210 to give us the same core clock as a $600 version. I've set the fan speed to 60%, which you can hear just a little bit, but it's not terribly loud. We'll see if that helps out and gets us a clean run through TimeSpy. All right, so these settings did allow us to improve our score again a little bit more, 92-94 for the graphics score, and again that's compared to 93-31. So we're getting within about 40 points, which is honestly pretty much negligible when it comes to tests like these. I think, a little disappointed that we saw instability at such a relatively low overclock. Again, with just the power slider max, which is just plus 14% on that, and then with the overclock, which is clearly an overclock that MSI is comfortable shipping a slightly more overbuilt card at, I wasn't expecting to actually have the test crash at the point that they did. But with just a little bit of coercing and mainly just increasing the fan speed, which can often get you better performance just by keeping the GPU's temperature down, which allows it to run at a higher frequency, I was able to get myself a little bit better score, and again, save that $100 by just loading up Afterburner and doing just a couple quick tweaks. So I think the only thing left to do is double check and see if NVIDIA has made fools of all of us reviewers by telling us that they would have $500 RTX 2070s available at launch. I wanted to double check that now that it is launch day, but we also have to somewhat be mindful of the fact that it is launch day, so initial launch numbers as far as what they have in stock might be refreshed soon. So I'm not immediately saying that if it's sold out that NVIDIA has screwed us all over, and I do have at least one response from EVGA when it comes to expected availability, but there appear to be 4 variants of the $500 card. That includes the EVGA RTX 2070 Black Edition, the Asus Turbo, which is a blower style design, the Gigabyte RTX 2070 DirectX 12, which is a 3-fan blower style design as well, and then of course the MSI Armor, which is the one that I've been testing here, also available for $500. Now, there are variants, like for instance, you can get an manufacturer overclock version of the Armor for $50 more. $550 is what it's selling for on Newegg. If you go over to Amazon, it's $570. But honestly, guys, do what I did here. Get that $500 version and just overclock it, unless more people do further testing and determine that yes, these $500 versions actually aren't that good at overclocking. But you can at least be relatively assured, I think, that you can hit the same frequencies that the $600 versions are shipping at. EVGA's $500 version is listed on Amazon, but it says it's temporarily out of stock. That is also the case for Asus's Turbo version, which for some reason is $530 here. This is what we don't want to see, is creeping up prices for these supposed $500 versions of the cards. Gigabytes is also here, also temporarily out of stock. And then the MSI's, again, that's the manufacturer overclock version. This one should also have the non-overclock version for $500. EVGA, though, is, like I said, is the only one who has responded to me. In all fairness, I've only given them about 2 hours to get back to me, so I might get further follow-ups later today, which I'll probably maybe post in the comment section down below if I get word from that. But they said they expect these to continue to be available through the holiday season, and you can buy directly from EVGA. Right now it's on pre-order status and it's expected to ship within 2 to 3 weeks. So again, initial availability might not be completely ubiquitous, but it does seem like within a couple weeks these will be shipping out, and people who want cards and are only willing to spend $500 can get them. Alright guys, that is pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. Again, just wanted to answer those basic questions about this RTX 2070 launch, since it's stuff that we weren't necessarily able to share since the cards hadn't launched yet, like they have now today, or probably yesterday as for when this video actually goes up. So I will post links where relevant to hopefully the $500 versions of these cards. They're at least available for pre-order or back order or ship in a couple weeks order. And this is something that I'm gonna try to keep an eye on in the coming weeks, and especially leading up to like November and Black Friday time, as people are maybe interested in buying these cards for Christmas presents or something like that. And keeping NVIDIA honest as much as we can in telling us that the cards will be available for a certain price and then those cards never actually being available for the price. This has me somewhat optimistic that you will still be able to buy a $500 RTX 2070. EVGA's response as well. Thank you, EVGA, for getting back to me on that one. And of course, if you are buying the $500 version, pretty simple to download the overclocking software, punch in the numbers for the higher end version, overclock it yourself, and save a little cash there. Thank you guys so much for watching this video though. Links again to relevant stuff is down in the description. Hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed it, and I will be back very soon, because if you didn't notice, there's another test bed in the background here that I'm supposed to be also working on at the same time. It's got the 9900K in it, which launches very soon, so stay tuned for that too. Subscribe and all that good stuff, and we'll see you guys in the next video.